Hi gardeners! It's the second weekend in September and fall is just 2 weeks away. So I'm busy getting ready for the fall growing season. It's still really hot right now in September, so I'm just focusing on planting my warm season crops right now. And my main goal for this weekend is to get my tomatoes planted. I have 20 varieties of tomatoes to try this season. So I've been growing these for 6 weeks from seed, and they are definitely ready to go in the ground. They're getting big, they're starting to fall over. So for today, I just thought I would show you how I plant my tomatoes. I used to always plant them in containers because we have really sandy soil that has a lot of nematodes in it, and I was always afraid to grow my heirloom tomatoes in the ground, so I've been growing in pots for a long time. Eventually, I just decided to try a few different times. I just trialed putting them in the ground to see how they would do, and I was really pleasantly surprised at how well the tomatoes did in the ground. So I'm not just putting it straight into the sandy soil though, so I wanted to show you what I am doing that's working for me so far. What I did was initially I got a couple big loads of some partially composted yard waste from one of the local cities. They give it away for free if you come pick it up. And it's not ideal. It was a little scary at first getting something that has like pieces of trash in it and it's not fully broken down. It's got some big chunks of wood in it, but it was free and it seemed better than just sand. So I got that 2 years ago and I've been planting in it, but I don't only plant in that too. I amend it with some chicken manure compost and some crab meal, which are both supposed to deter nematodes. So I've already mixed that into the bed, and then I'm going to plant in the holes and add a little bit more crab meal into the holes as I plant, and also some store-bought compost. So ideally I would like to make my own compost, but I don't have time or space right now. But you might be able to see behind me here, I have a big mulch pile, and that is from chip drop. So it's going to take a couple years to break down, but the idea is that will be some really good compost once it breaks down. So anyway, so I'm going to show you what I do. Before I start planting, I figure out what my layout is going to be within the bed that I'm planting in, and I set the plants out where they're going to go. The ideal spacing for tomatoes is to have 2 to 3 feet between each plant in a row, and the minimum spacing is about 18 inches. I have a lot of tomatoes to plant, and I really don't have a big enough area to plant them in, so I'm squeezing them in a little more than I'd like. You don't want them too close together because it reduces the airflow, and that leads to more diseases that spread easily among the leaves of the plants that are all touching each other. It also can keep them from getting enough sunlight if they're shading each other's leaves. I'm doing my best to stagger the plants within the row to try to maximize my space, and I've got close to 2 feet between each plant, but ideally I should be spacing them a little further apart. I'm going to have to keep them well pruned in order to help the airflow around the plants. Also, you can see how some of the plants have gotten so big and top heavy that they're falling over. This makes it a little harder to transplant them, and it would have been better if I could have planted them a week or two earlier when they were a more manageable size. Usually I plant my seedlings at around 4 or 5 weeks, which works out great. But life has been too busy, so I'm just getting them planted at around 6 weeks. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is dig a really deep hole because I'd like to plant my tomatoes really deep. So, and I'm making a big hole because I'm going to add compost into it, so I need extra room. So hopefully you can see how deep it is. And next I'm going to add some of this mushroom compost into the hole, and I'm going to basically fill it up with compost. The cat is pushing on the camera, that's why it's moving. She likes to help. Okay, so once I've got it pretty much full of compost, then I'm going to add a couple of tablespoons of worm castings and a couple tablespoons of this crab meal and a quarter cup of this Sustain 464 organic fertilizer. And then I'm going to mix that all in real good. And now that I've got it mixed good, I need to kind of redig my hole. But I want some of this good nutrient-rich compost to stay at the bottom where the plant roots are, to kind of make a little bit of a barrier between it and the sand. But I also want to be able to backfill with this good compost, so I'm just kind of making a new hole within my hole that's just compost. So I want the compost to be surrounding my plant. So I'm trying to dig it pretty deep again, but I still want some in the bottom. All right, so now it's a pretty deep hole again. And I'm going to get my tomato plant, and I like to pinch off these lower leaves. These are not the true leaves. They're just like the first little leaves when the plant emerges from the soil. And I just pinch those off, and I usually try to plant all the way up to the bottom set of true leaves, which I don't know if my hole is going to be quite deep enough for that, and I don't really want to dig it too much deeper because I'm getting down to the sand. I don't really want it in the sand, so it might not be quite as deep as I want, but it should still be pretty deep. I'm just going to try to get my plant out. I'm just going to put it down in the hole. It's not really as deep as I usually do, but it's pretty deep. All right, and then I'm going to backfill the hole with this good compost. I'm just going to pat down the soil. Another thing I do after I've planted it is I make a little bit of a trench around the outside of the plant, like a little ways away from the root zone. I make this trench all around it to kind of hold some of the water when it rains or when it gets watered. So I don't know if you can see that, but I kind of dug this big round trench right here. And the idea is to capture the water and help it to go to the root zone. So this one's pretty much done. Once I get my tomatoes planted, I water them in with a nice deep soaking. So I got 14 of my 20 tomatoes planted out in this bed, but I didn't have room for all of them, so I'll plant the other 6 in various other places throughout the yard. I ran out of time, but next weekend I will come back and scatter some seeds around in all of the empty spaces between the tomatoes. I'm going to plant some flowers like alyssum and marigold and some bee balm and bergamot that I have in soil blocks and some basil. And so next weekend I'll come and plant some more things, and then I'll cover everything with a leaf mulch, and then I'll be done.